Well, hello, everyone. Good morning if you're on the West Coast. Good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. And welcome to our first Leica conversation for 2021. I am Beatrice Perkins. I am one of the team members that is here to help bring you great conversations and inspiration. I see you all checking in everywhere from Minnesota to New York City and Long Island. We want you to chat amongst yourself. We want to get to know who you are and where you are. We have a really engaging conversation coming up for you today. There's going to be a few great surprises that we have in store for you this year. We have really upped the ante on giving you an amazing experience online as you guys are connecting with us from home. Today, I have with me co-hosting and kind of moderating for your questions, Karen Karnani, who's our director here at Leica.
Welcome, everyone. So if you have any questions for Neil, please drop them in the Q&A feature and feel free to have some conversations in the chat area. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to B to introduce our special guest.
Okay, so today we have, you all know who we have. You all have registered to be here. An amazing guest, Neil Perry, who is I like to think of Neil as a Renaissance man. And I say that because it's one of those rare instances that we have where we see someone who is a great creator, and they're a great creator in many different industries and facets. He is an amazing musician, and we came to know him through his music, the band Perry, but he's also an awesome photographer. He is someone who I think is just gifted with his hands, because this is what I think of when I think of you, Neil. If there's something that involves your hands and something that you can do, you're going to make magic. And I think it's interesting to me that we have two eyes and we have two ears, and those two things are what are really the drivers for your creativity. So you all are in for a really special treat today, but I'm going to let you say hello, and then we're going to dive into this amazing conversation that we have. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, B? And Karen, good to see you all.
We had a lot of fun today in preparing for this. I want to make sure that we're being recorded because we have a lot of new technology today, and I want to make sure that we don't miss out. We've had some updates to our Zoom experience, and I don't see my little red dot, so I want my team to just give me a thumbs up to make sure that we are definitely recording this session, because it's when we don't. Okay, I just got the thumbs up. Okay, great. Okay, here's our promise to you. You're going to have fun today in this conversation with Neil. We are not going to be able to get through all of the amazing materials that we want to share with you today. And we are not going to be able to answer every question that is going to come up for you. So, as I said, Neil is someone who is not new when it comes to understanding the nuances and kind of the experimentation with creativity. And so that's why today we decided to kind of anchor the year with untamed inspiration. We know, especially with people who are maybe quarantined to their homes or their neighborhoods or their cities, they're not traveling around a lot, that you want to get inspiration from every source that you can. And Neil is the great kind of creator when it comes to that opportunity. So in Untamed Inspiration, we're going to dive into a bit of how Neil came into this camera life, and I want you to take us a little bit through your story, Neil. And here's a couple of the things that I want to make sure that we kind of capture with you, because, like I said, with your hands, you're the kind of quintessential creator. I want to know what the influences were for you, kind of at an early age, and how it grew into really being able to be someone who is able to create magic and awards and opportunity from just about everything he touches.
Well, again, thanks for having me, B. You know, I love you, and I love Leica, and everything that y'all have done is just, y'all supported me and y'all have encouraged me, and that means the world. But I'm really excited to talk to y'all today, give you a little bit, my background, and yeah, what has inspired me and how I've found the things that have really interested me, to pursue in life. And there have been a bunch that I've tried my hands at, and some that I felt really connected to, and some that I haven't. But I'll start from the beginning. I was born in Jackson, Mississippi. As I'm sure a lot of people know, I have an older brother and an oldest sister, and we're in a band together. And early on in life, we moved down to Mobile, Alabama. And when we moved down to Alabama, I remember I was about 6 years old when we moved down there. And that was kind of at an age where I started to notice and appreciate all of the different creative outlets that my parents were opening our eyes up to. Before that, I don't think I was quite old enough to really appreciate it and understand what was going on. But I remember moving down to Mobile, we sort of had these little rituals. Every Saturday night, we'd listen to NPR, Prairie Home Companion. So we'd be listening to bluegrass. I remember my mom would have on Loretta Lynn records. She'd have on Michael Jackson, and my dad, he was the rock head of the family. So Rolling Stones, the Beatles, U2, and that was just the music. They loved exposing us to all different kinds of music. But I also remember it was really interesting. My mom, who had an art major in college, she majored in art, became an art teacher in school for a while, and then she decided she wanted to go back and get her law degree. So then she went and she passed the bar, and so she had this amazing combination of left and right brain,
For sure.
which is actually kind of rare, to find responsible creatives. That's a very most creatives, and I'm including myself in this because sometimes we need someone to organize our thoughts and our processes into steps to get them done. But she had the amazing combination of both of those things. She was really, really instrumental in exposing us to, she would have us try out for plays in Mobile. There was one time we were in Fairhope, Alabama, which is a very artistic town, and really it's a very cool cultural place. She saw a flyer for clay making and working clay on a wheel and going through the process of putting it through the furnace and everything like that. So we did that. And we would go to small orchestra performances and stuff. So I just remember growing up, and this is before we even really showed an interest in anything creative. Again, I was about 6 at the time, but looking back on it, I really appreciate them wanting to open our eyes up to being able to find something beautiful. There's always something, if you are aware that there is. There's always something to be amazed by.
There's always something near you. Yeah. I want to go to as you say this, I want to bring the slides back up because I love this picture that we have of you where you have this beautiful bowl cut, which is what everyone's doing in a pandemic now. Putting the bowl around and
it's manageable.
Cutting their kids' heads. But this camera that you have, and I remember when we were speaking before about doing this program, you kind of described the experience of kind of getting your first camera, and that you found this picture, I think, is golden. So I think it's delightful that your mother started as an artist and then went into kind of law and kind of the business side. And maybe one day we'll have to have a conversation about that. But tell us a little bit about, so you say you were 6 and it looks like you're not much older than that here, kind of getting those creative kind of insights. And just the smile on your face here and you kind of holding, you even got the neck strap on this camera at this age.
Yeah, I remember I believe that was at Disney World. We took a little family vacation there, and that's my old Fisher Price camera, and it had little film capsules. It wasn't quite 35 millimeter, but I can't remember what format film it was, but I took that everywhere. The second I got that, I remember it was pretty much always around my neck. And I've got my old photo album of all my original photos somewhere. I'll have to pull that out, and next time we talk, I'll definitely get that for you to share. But my nickname growing up was Point and Shoot. That was always my nickname.
Oh, really?
I would never wait for people to be ready for their shot. I would just sort of put them in the area I wanted them in. And then when they were just sort of generally ready, I would just pull it up and shoot. And so half the photos I have when I was younger, most of them, people's eyes are closed or they're still eating a hot dog at the baseball game, mid bite. It was, all my original photos are very rough, but it definitely set me off on a journey, and I appreciate that. And out of all the creative outlets that my parents exposed me to, I think obviously music is one that I've stuck with and has meant so much to me. But then photography, and I've tried a lot of different creative things. Like I said, pottery, I've tried painting, sketching, and those are all fun in their own way. But the two that I guess have really made the most impact in my life, as much as they mean a lot to other people, just the act of doing it, it's very fulfilling. Photography and music have been the two that have stuck with me the most.
Yeah.
And I definitely give credit to my parents for giving me the opportunity to try so many different things,
It's amazing that you say that. We've had so many photographers over the course of time. And quite often we hear that even when they're kind of in the field and doing the work, music is the inspiration that keeps them going. There's so many threads between music and photography, whether someone is involved in that as a musician or not.
Yeah, for sure. I do think that they hold hands quite well. And I will say I do give a lot of credit to my parents, because my siblings and I'm in a band with my siblings, like I mentioned, and as important to us, we do realize the connection between music and the influence of visuals. We know for ourselves personally, sometimes there'll be times where we won't like a song that we hear on the radio or something until we see the video. And that's happened on multiple times where we see the video and then it just clicks something in our brains. Like, okay, now the song makes much more sense to us. And even for our videos, I mean, I can't tell you how many mood boards we create during an album cycle, just trying to really make the connection of those two things really perfect. And we always have our go-to influences. I mean, Tarantino is an always go-to for us. We find something to be inspired by with Tarantino. But also one of our favorite things as well is finding new creatives who we can be inspired by, who definitely like hold hands creatively with some of the tenets of our favorites, but have their own style and stuff. So we love finding the connection between music and the visuals. It's so important. It really is.
And so we're moving now kind of from that inspiration that you had regarding music to then taking that into photography and on the streets. And so and so I would love to just kind of hear a little bit of the stories behind what drove you to pick up the camera and start that experimentation and start to look through the lens to see something different and to be moved by something different.
Yeah, well, I remember when music started becoming more of an important thing for us, all of my other little hobbies at the time sort of took the back seat to that. And unfortunately, photography at that time, and I'm talking about when I was eight, going through 18, like it because music was our pursuit. It was what we were pouring ourselves into day after day and really working hard to perfect. But the things started happening to where when we started jumping on tours and traveling, and I sort of started getting the understanding of, okay, we're getting to see some pretty amazing places, like definitely being blessed in that way. I want to remember all of this. And so I sort of picked up, well, not my old Fisher Price camera. By that point, I had sort of another camera. I picked it back up, and that definitely like brought back that love for it. And I remembered why I loved it so much. And so my early photography, as you're seeing here, a lot of it is more street photography and shots of like when I'm traveling and stuff. This is one of my favorites. I love this one. This was actually a trip while we were over in Europe. I can't remember if we were touring or not, but we were in Florence, Italy here. And this was just in a square down there. And there are a million. It's so amazing. In Italy, you can walk down almost every street and then find something new every single time. But this was a square I'd never been to, and it was just so much energy. The kids were playing. There was this guy blowing these huge bubbles, and it's just an amazing energy, so much life, and it just felt warm.
Do you remember which camera you used for this one?
A lot of the shots you're showing right now are the M6. So when I finally stepped up and decided to make more of a thing of my photography, I wanted the film look, and I wanted to force myself. I think we've talked about this before, B. I wanted to force myself to use only manual, because when I first started out, of course, I used automatic functions on everything. I had a digital camera, and it was great, but I was like, if I want to do this, I want to learn the scales, like when you learn music, you learn scales first, and it teaches you how to do anything. If you know your scales, you can do anything. And so for me, knowing how my camera worked, how moving one dial affected another setting, that was important. So these were all the M6 shots on film, 35 millimeter. And yeah. Honestly,
just kind of going through the streets and kind of grabbing graffiti and kind of
yeah,
Marlon Brando over in Italy cracks me up.
Over in Italy, yeah, it was the most random thing, and that's what I love, especially in Europe. There's, again, it's sort of like I feel like I've walked all over Florence, and I still find something new every single time. It's always exciting. It's sort of a treasure hunt, and if you have your camera there, you can just keep those memories forever. I remember my big thing.
So I want to hold there because this brings up something, because you said that the M6, you wanted to kind of grab something that was manual. Was that your first Leica?
That was my first Leica.
You started off just ready to dive in and like, I'm gonna
get
in here and move some stuff and figure some stuff out.
Yeah, and I do a lot of research. When I get a new camera, I research it and make sure that it does all the things that I'm wanting it to. And one of the things I really wanted was the film look. So if you want the film look, you go with film. And then along with that, I wanted to be forced to learn how it all worked.
So did you find out about Leica from a Google search or from a recommendation?
One of the guys who worked with us, one of our crew at the time, he bought himself an M6. And obviously I knew about them. It's like if you have just even a little bit of knowledge of cameras, you know what Leica is, and you've seen legendary photos taken by Leica, the flag being raised on Iwo Jima, or the sailor kissing the girl coming back from World War II, or Muhammad Ali. All those photos are so classic. And so, no, I knew about Leica, but actually getting my hands on one, it did me in, and I didn't have a choice after that. I blame our crew guy for all of this, but I'm glad about it.
Okay. And where is this? So we went from the street, and then we're kind of, it looks like in a hotel room, or?
That shot was taken in Rome, where there's this charity called Muhammad Ali's Fight Night. Actually, funny enough, I did not plan that. It was Muhammad Ali's Fight Night, and it's for his hospital here in the US. And he does a couple charities, one in Arizona, and this one they took over to Italy to combine it with Andrea Bocelli's charity as well, and which is obviously based in Italy. So this was in our hotel room. The second we landed in Rome and got to our room, I saw this, and the colors and everything were just amazing. And I don't know what draw me to it. Sometimes my photos really don't have any, like, I don't plan them. Just sometimes I pick up my camera and take a shot if something, just even a small thing, catches my eye. But this one always caught it. And another thing too,
I think what I like about that though is the reminder that there's photo opportunities around us all the time, whether we're in our house or stepping just outside of it or visiting with a friend or something like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. My head is always on a swivel. I drive myself crazy because sometimes I feel like I miss out on some conversations because I'm always looking for my at this point, I'm just sort of tuned to keep my eye open for anything, a texture on a wall or an interesting shadow or something. But I love it. If you love photography and that's what you do, then hey, you're doing it right, because you'll find something cool to photograph every time,
And do you find that there's certain things that you look for depending on your mood or where you are? Are there certain things that make you stop and like take notice or like try to extend the moment that you have visually?
Yes, there will be those moments where I don't have a reason for taking a shot that I like, but I just take it. But generally, and this actually ties back into my music and in the way that we think even with our music. A lot of times when I find an interesting thing to shoot, it's because there's some sort of foil, some sort of juxtaposition to it. So whether it's like, just on a simple explanation, if there's a super deep shadow but then something beautifully white, that's a foil. That's a very opposite. It's showing the light and the dark. And even with people too, I guess it's probably my theory with people too, is like, and I think Klein, he's another one of my my photog hero, Stephen Klein. He does a lot of fashion shoots. I think he does a great job of finding the light and the darkness in his subjects every single time. And so to me, that's one of the things I've taken away from him, and I definitely try to apply to everything. So even I guess on a more everyday level, if I see an interesting wall, and I think I have a photo in here that we'll eventually get to, there's a wall, and it's this beautiful stucco, and it's got this crack in it. It's just this hard crack, and I just loved I don't know, it felt beautiful and also destroyed, and that really stood out to me. And sometimes it's simple things. Yeah, I love that shot. That shot was taken at East Jesus. My band and we took a trip from Marfa, Texas, back to LA. We road tripped it, and we stopped at all these crazy places along the way. The guy who started this was one of the original founders of Burning Man, and it's years and years ago, and a couple years after they started it, it was him and two others, him and one of the other co-founders, after they started, they felt it was getting too commercial. And so they decided they wanted a year-round Burning Man version of Burning Man that stayed true to the art and kept all commerciality out of it. And so they created this little commune. Oh gosh, where is it? It's not in California, maybe California. I need to look that up again, but it's on top of this huge hill, and it's just amazing. Some of the most amazing art. They take donations in metal, scrap metal, and any weird piece of something you think that they could use, they take donations in that way. It's pretty amazing. We got to go behind and see their actual living quarters where they live, and just amazing people. Yep, that's Reed. We took that in Marfa. We were on the worst diet of all time, so eating a can of tuna. And this is that shot I was telling you about.
I'm seeing so many kind of questions coming in for you, kind of regarding your gear and your kind of visual bend. So let me get to a couple of them, kind of here while we have a moment.
Yes.
How do you see the transition? And we'll probably get to a little bit of this as we go, but like the transition that you've seen from when you first started kind of this experimentation of grabbing a camera and kind of going out and getting your hands dirty manually to where you are now in your photography. Anyone who follows, your Instagram or, your kind of media sees the progression of the work that you have been doing.
Well, I think, again, just because it was the nature of my life and I was just traveling a lot and seeing some amazing things I want to capture. If you do look at where I started out, it was much more photojournalistic, I guess you could say, taking pictures of observations, the surroundings and stuff, which was great. And I still love that. But as I even got deeper into it and went from my M6 to my original M10, when I decided to go digital for a couple of reasons, film is very expensive to develop. And also too, I kind of was wanting to do more experimenting at an eventual cheaper cost than film would let me do. So I jumped in and I did a bunch of research, and the M10 was the closest thing that I would get to film in the same format and stuff. So I jumped to the M10, and at that point too, this was probably 2000. Oh gosh, I can't even remember. My timelines are all messed up at this point. At that point, we had gotten to work with a lot of photographers with our band that we had wanted to work with. So we had worked with Stephen Klein. We had worked with Sasha Samsonova, who's a great photographer, and a lot of great ones in Nashville as well. David McClister, Declan Whitebloom, a lot of those guys. And so I was starting to be more exposed to like setup shots, portraits, more editorial feeling shots, and I liked the creative work that went into that and the possibilities that you could get with that. And so, and it's something I'm definitely still working on. I'm not at all claiming to be a pro at it yet, but it's something that I'm working on. I'm trying to understand all of the different facets of setup shots, plan shots, not just I've got my camera here and there's something cool to shoot. And I actually think people are starting to see more of that planned feeling in my photos, even just in everyday life. Like you can plan an artistic shot just in your surroundings. Like, again, if you see a cool shadow that falls on someone's face in an interesting way, or they're wearing something not crazy, but their personality is crazy, finding the foil of letting their personality jump out while they're wearing, I don't know, all black. Or so I'm really trying to experiment and find myself in more of a planned portrait editorial fashion type way right now. And I think people are starting to see that shift. But I'm not going to lie, with quarantine going on, I would not mind diving back into the more photojournalistic stuff too. I'm ready to get back out into the world and start living, you know?
Yeah. So, okay. So then we have here Dante Alighieri, who I love, and I know that you love, you know, that literature as well. So literature,
Yes.
seeing literature as a little bit of a influence as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, all credit to my parents, and that's actually Beatrice. That's that bison's name. So we raise bison, and that's our herd leader. Usually in a bison herd, a female is the herd leader, and that's her. But yeah, so our parents, again, one of the other things that they really instilled in us was a love of reading and stuff. So we didn't really have a lot of TV growing up, but our parents would just keep books in our hands at all time. Anytime we wanted a book, they would make sure we had it, so we'd have an appreciation for it. And so the Divine Comedy was one of them. I appreciate it a lot more now. I didn't quite appreciate it when I was like 12 or 13 whenever I read it, because that was a brutal book to read at that point, but I definitely appreciate it now. And yeah, definitely literature has influenced my photography, and definitely lyric writing and perspective too. You know, some of my favorite authors are Steinbeck and Flannery O'Connor, you know, Southern Gothic, and some of that West Coast literature. That's Virgil right there.
So yeah, I was going to say, so now we're kind of moving, and I want to kind of bring Karen in to handle some of the questions that she's been seeing kind of in the chat and kind of coming through at the panels as well, to kind of dive into some of our readers' insights and kind of queries for you.
So we see that, you know, we see your body of work evolving, right? And you started with film and the M6. Could you tell us about your journey from film to digital and what you're shooting now?
Yeah, so again, I started out with just a good point and shoot, but a point and shoot that did everything for me. So I remember coming to a point where I was like, I wasn't having to work to take photos, and I didn't really like that. It felt lazy to me. And it also, I wasn't getting the look of the photos that I really wanted. The actual camera itself that I was using did not give me what I wanted. I wanted the classic look that I felt was timeless, and I wasn't getting that. So I did a lot of research, and the M6 was what definitely stood out to me among all the cameras that I looked up. And then it was just serendipitous in a way that one of our crew guys got himself an M6. And so he let me shoot with it for a day. I think we were in New York doing something, and he let me shoot with it for a day. And obviously I didn't get to see the results of it, but I got to feel it and hold it, and it just felt right. And then I looked up all the classic images that were taken on the M6, and it looked the way I wanted it to look. So I jumped in on that, kept that for probably 4 or 5 years, took tons of shots with that. And then again, as I became more exposed to fashion photography, editorial, the Stephen Klein shoot to me was a really important one. And I think a lot of, at least our band's fans, seen that shot. It was a much more stylized shoot than everyone was used to from our band. But for me, it was eye-opening in a creative way of, okay, this is what I can develop into if this is what I want to do. And so I did, and that definitely became a focus. And so the M10, which this was before the mono came out, and the M10R, which just came out. So I dove into the M10 and got myself, I had 35 millimeter lens at that point. I just got a couple other lenses, and I started experimenting and trying some different stage shots. Mostly it was with my siblings, because we're always together and recording and stuff, and fans always love to see what they're up to. So I started doing more stylized shots with them. And then this really cool opportunity actually came up. A friend of mine, while we were in LA for a couple of years, a friend of mine is a designer, and he's got this really cool brand called De La Fuente. And he was going through a creative kind of renaissance too. He started to designing some women's clothes. He usually did men's, but he just kind of had this inspiration to switch it up. And so he started designing some women's clothes, and he needed a campaign shot for it.
Yeah, let me
So
pull those up on screen.
Yeah, it was a really, really cool moment. And
We'll come back to a couple of these.
nostalgia. I'm getting so much
There we go.
nostalgia.
It's like we're just
Yeah.
gonna jump in and out.
Yeah, so this shoot was really fun because it was my first time to really find a concept, look at his clothes, and then find inspiration in it and design a shoot around it. And so for me at that time, we were in the studio recording an album, which is yet to be released, but hopefully will be soon. And while we were recording, we had this television in the studio while we were recording with the audio off. And we would play movies that would inspire the feeling that we wanted on the record. And one of those was Natural Born Killers, written by my favorite Quentin Tarantino. Oliver Stone directed it, but it still had the vibe of Tarantino, even in the direction. And I love the characters of Mickey and Mallory. And so Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis were in that movie. And I wanted the spirit. And so when I looked at the clothes in here, and they felt very wilded out, you know, the overalls and the short shirts, and it felt just crazy. And we found these two great models in LA. And when I told my friend, I was like, have you ever seen Natural Born Killers? I kind of want to do a shoot that feels like that. Like these two girls who feel like they're just living their best free spirit life that walks right up to the line of psychotic. And you definitely could see that. You can see they're either living their best free life or they are just about to murder somebody. And so that was really the first time I got to plan a shoot. And we went out to the desert in California. It's funny. Thankfully, with a little bit of our history, I got to know this. Anytime you plan a shoot, expect everything to go wrong on the shoot, either on the technical side or whatever reason. And thankfully the shoot itself went well, but we had so many technical issues. But it was a great shoot to be on, and got to, you know, dip my toes into what an actual art directed shoot would look like. And we got this really cool car. The girls look great. So that was an eye-opening experience for me as well. And it's definitely something I'm excited to continue developing for myself, you know?
So Neil, I know that Stephen Klein has inspired your visual language, especially as you approach fashion photography. We hear the inspiration from Quentin Tarantino, and you see that clearly in the approach to fashion photography. Now, I also know that you seek inspiration and mentoring through other photographers. Could you tell us about the approach and what you look for in other photographers, and how you get that experience with them to guide your photographic journey, and what tips you've received from mentors that you would like to share with our audience?
Well, definitely one of the things that this has sort of just been me, and it's been my siblings and my whole family, like what we don't know, we're willing to do whatever to find out. And meaning, like, if we don't know an answer, we will ask questions. We will always be humble enough to ask the questions and recognize there are things that you don't know. And so I do appreciate that from my family being instilled in me. You've connected me to so many great photographers, you know, Brian Bowen Smith and Dennis Helick, is those two guys I really appreciate. And I think what I appreciate most about them is their openness to. Here's the question that has been in my mind, and as I talk to a ton of photographers, it's encouraging to know they've thought the same thing. When you go into something and dive a little bit deeper into it, you don't know what you don't know. Meaning, like, sometimes I don't know the questions to ask, and it's kind of a mind twister. Like, it's a mind twister. There's some things I don't know to ask.
It's with everything you don't know. Yeah, you're in the dark about what even to consider, or what is waiting kind of down the horizon for you. Yeah,
exactly. So especially with Dennis, what I love and appreciate about him is his openness to be patient and talk to me through things, and to break it down, and sometimes in its most simplest forms. And then also, you know, we're talking about a couple things to work on together, and I really appreciate that. And my whole goal with that is to shadow. You know, I don't mind being in a shadow role for a lot of things, as long as I know I'm going to learn something really important. And so I really appreciate that about him. One of the things that I think,
hold that
Go
thought,
ahead.
because I know that you have 4 Leicas. And so as someone who's been kind of deep into this kind of visual expression and
Mhm,
experimentation, I'd love to hear, I want to kind of shift the gear a bit, hear about your gear and what you find those different cameras deliver for you,
mhm,
because it's, you could just stick with the M6 and be satisfied, or you know what I mean? And so I would love to hear
mhm,
about the progression of you saying, okay, now I want a different, camera because I
mhm,
want to achieve a different thing, or because I want to
mhm,
have a different experience. I want to know what led you through that navigation and
mhm.
consideration.
Yeah, so I think I touched on the M6. To me, it was my entry level. If you learn this, you
All
can,
manual. Yeah.
yeah, you can pretty much just start picking what you want after that, as long as you know the basics. So the M6 was that reason, and the look of it was just so classic, and it'll always be timeless. So that was that reason. Again, when I went to the M10, originally the original M10, it was for the freedom that I would be able to experiment without having to pay development costs for the film being developed. So I could take a photo, look at the screen and see what I was doing and adjust quickly. And then it's just a faster, when you're trying to learn more of the artistic things, it's a quicker way to learn. So that was that reason. When I went to the mono, I got to thank you, Leica, for sending loaner cameras to your photographers. It means the world to us. When I tried the mono, it gave me the feeling of a Steinbeck novel. That's probably the best way I can put it. Anytime I took a photo with the M10 mono, it just the same feeling I'd get reading East of Eden or Grapes of Wrath or Of Mice and Men. That's what it felt like. It felt like classic American. It felt gritty, and yeah, so that was the feeling. And honestly, yeah, I took that on the mono. I love that feeling, and so for me, that's what I wanted with that. And uh, also, when you take a flash and use a flash on the M10 mono in broad daylight, it just does something insane, especially when you're shooting portraits of people. It's just an amazing thing. And then when I went to the M10R, that was a little bit of a splurge thing. I wanted an excuse to get it, so I sold
So,
my original M10 to a friend of mine, and yeah, I did the thing. I dove in because I also like the bigger sensor, because I'm also, when it comes
so hold
to
there.
Leica. Okay.
I have to hop. So here with this image that we see where it looks like it's this kind of, kind of slight blurred windswept scene.
Mhm.
What camera did you use here, and what was happening? What was the thinking here? Was this a kind of process of experimentation, or
That was a
what's the
long shutter
backstory on
speed
that?
on the highway. Long shutter speed on the highway. So we were, my sister and I, we had taken a road trip, and I can't remember where we were headed, but obviously it was pretty rural at the moment. And I like messing with long shutter speeds on the road, especially with other cars and like their brake lights and their headlights and stuff. I love messing with that. I actually want to do a series of long exposures to a whole bunch of different kind of light bulbs and stuff. But
Hmm.
this was kind of one of those things. She was driving, and so I had my M10R. I can't remember which lens I was using for this, but I was just holding it outside the window, and I didn't even really recognize that building when I took the shot, because I was just kind of looking at my camera and being in on
Okay.
that. And I took a long
Hmm.
shutter, and obviously, usually when you take a long shutter, it just completely blurs out the light. But with this shot, what was crazy to me, it sort of did a double. It looks more like a double exposure in a way, as opposed to just a long shutter speed.
Right.
And like you can still see it says Gulf on there, GULF, and it felt uh, it just felt really weird to me. It felt culty in a weird way. So that was a long shutter speed on a road trip with Kimberly, and
It's interesting. They say there are no mistakes in art, and photography is definitely an art. So it's like you're like wrong shutter speed. No, just different shutter speed.
yeah,
And you learn
yeah,
something new. You didn't know what you didn't know to achieve that. Now you know
yeah,
what you would need
exactly.
to know to achieve this. Um, when you are shooting, do you have a preference for black and white or color, or is it based on a
Yes.
scene or based on, okay, what's that?
For me, I try to shoot in color as much as possible, because black and white you can shoot black and white and it'll make anything look great. So to me, this is part of me just trying to at least figure out some things. I always try to shoot color as much as possible. And then if the shot just is obviously meant to be black and white, I'll just do the thing and make it that way. So that's kind of my thought on that. I mean, do I prefer black and white? I'm super colorblind. So black and white for me is just, it's an amazing thing. But I try to mess with color as much as possible to see if I can.
So I can't let this moment escape me. The picture that we're seeing on the screen is right behind you. So, so talk a bit about your post-processing, right? So obviously, you know, lots of people, you know, sometimes let that film just kind of sit there before it gets to kind of post, especially you have a digital camera, it sits on that memory card before it gets to the tangible. So we can clearly see that that is not the case with you. So talk a bit about the considerations that you have with post-processing. Have you been in a dark room? Do you have a go-to? You know, what are you pushing? What are you doing when it comes to getting things on print? Okay, so I'll start, I want to make sure this is clear because I'm still learning a lot, but when I was shooting film, at that point, I did not know how to develop. So I would send it off. There's this great place in LA called the Icon, and they develop film and they're great. But after a couple hundred rolls, it gets expensive. But my whole theory with post-processing on film was, you know, when you buy the M6 and you use Portra in it, Portra 400 or whatever, you're buying also into those looks that they give you. So my theory with film was, what you shoot is what you get. You can do a little bit of cropping if you want. I don't really have a big problem about that. But as far as messing with the colors and stuff, I'm more of a purist with film in that way than digital. Now with digital, I'm a little bit more free with it. I tend to only mess with, you know, a little bit of the settings. I don't want to go in too deep, and, you know, if something caught my eye in the real life, I try to leave that as much the same in post-processing as much as I can. We've got a few questions here. Oh my gosh, I'm seeing them pop up. So so questions about, you know, where can we see the full resolution versions of your work? For that, I would say follow him on Instagram. We'll post the links for his channel in the chat here, and perhaps he can follow up with you on those. Do you have a favorite lens? So we talked a bit about your cameras, but do you have a favorite lens? What do you, are you a one lens person? Are you a swappable? Like when you head out, what are you doing? I know you have the Q2, so in that instance, you don't need it, but yeah, with the other ones, what are your lenses? Yes, the bad thing about having a lot of friends, photographer friends, is you start sharing your gear with each other, meaning like, look at this lens that I just got. And so it's very easy to fall into the trap of getting jealous of something that someone else has. And so I think Karush, who's also another Leica photographer, I think he's on here. He said he was watching. He had a 50mm Noctilux. And if you know anything about Leica, you'll realize that is such a classic lens. And Kieran, she told me if you can figure out how to really learn the ins and outs of that lens, you will be the quintessential Leica photographer. I definitely am learning. I haven't learned it yet, but that lens has not left my M10R since I got it. It's 50mm Noctilux, 0.95 f-stop is it's just amazing. And what it does, the bokeh, it's just, honestly, I can't really explain what it does. It's such a sharp focus, and whatever it focuses on at 0.95, everything else is just this beautiful blur, and the lights in the background just fade into the softest colors. It's amazing. Has it not left my lens? I'm going to try to force myself to get back into figuring out how to really work my other lenses too, but yeah, that one. So I blame Karush for that. And so even with what we're seeing on the screen here, kind of knowing the power of that lens, what editing process have you taken even here? Like how close are you to your subject? How far are you? How much have you cropped in or out to achieve these final looks that we're seeing here? Yeah, so these were shot on the M10, the mono, actually, because at the time something was going on the fritz with my M10, so it was in repairs at the time. So for this fashion shoot, I actually only had my M6 for color film, and
for digital, my mono. So it was pretty much an all black and white shoot. And for this one, I believed I didn't have my Noct Deluxe at the time. For this shoot, I was using mainly 35mm lens, or 21mm as well. But I think these were 35. And I was, I was probably 7 feet away from them at the time, and I was using a remote flash. I was using a Profoto, their B10 strobe, and it was really great. And towards this moment, I think it was coming towards it was getting darker towards the end of sunset. And yeah, and so for me as well, even on that shoot, a lot of it was experimenting with, what would it look like if I was blasting them with the flash, with the sunset in their face as opposed to behind them. And so that was a really interesting shoot. I knew a lot going into that shoot, but I also learned a ton coming out of it as well. When you're in a shoot, at least one of those kinds of shoots, I do feel like, you will stumble upon some great techniques. And so for me in that one, I definitely did. And a lot of it's experimentation. I kind of always want to be in experiment mode, because you never know what kind of thing you will discover while doing that, even on shoots like that. I don't know, I may want to eventually get my shtick down more officially, but I don't know. I think it's kind of fun to always be open to, what if you move the light here, or change a certain setting in this way? I don't know. I think it'll always keep things interesting.
You also have you have a way of learning by doing, right? And I remember a moment with you where we wanted to take an image of yours off the sensor and bring it to life, and actually bring it to Leica. And you learned about the printing process and how to approach now your images if you have an intention to print. Can you take us through what that journey looked like?
Yeah, well, one of the greatest moments of my life was when our dear new president of Leica America, when he joined the ranks and apparently liked one of my photos, this one right here. I'm pretty proud of it. So after this whole process, I framed it for myself, but he liked this photo and he wanted it in his office, which to me was just a huge honor. So yeah, Karen, you connected me with a great printer, and we went through that process. I sent him the photo, and there was just a series of back and forths of changing settings, because when he would print it, what would come off of the printing press would look different than what I was seeing on my sensor or on the computer as I was editing it. So it was a really interesting back and forth, because for me, one of the things that I didn't even know, one of the things that didn't come to my mind, was the fact that what you print, the printer will react to the settings differently than the computer will show. So sometimes to see in real life what comes out in a print, you have to over exaggerate some of the settings on your computer, and what doesn't look right on your computer screen will come out looking exactly the way you want it to on the print. And so that was an interesting learning process, and one that I remembered. I eventually it's actually on right now here in Greenville. It's my own small gallery. Just did a small series of photos for the General Morgan Inn, which is a historic hotel, beautiful here in Greenville. And so I thankfully had that knowledge going into that process, that you'll have to experiment, print something, hold it up compared to what's on your computer screen. If it feels similar, great, then you've nailed it. If not, then really identify what's not working, what's being lost in translation from the computer to the printer, and then make adjustments for that. And so I really appreciate the process that I went through with you, Karen, and the printer during that time. That was an eye-opening. That was one of the things, I don't know what I don't know. That was one of the things I figured out just by doing. And so that was a great one for sure.
That's one of the things that we admire about you, is how proactive you are with your approach, and how you really get into the details. Getting, as B had mentioned earlier, that you get your hands dirty in the process, right? And that's really how you learn. I have one last question for you before you close.
Yes, ma'am.
Looking back at your photographic journey, if you had one piece of advice to give Neil Perry, the photographer, when you first pick up the camera, to guide that journey, what would that one piece of advice look like?
This piece of advice I'm still giving myself: don't let the nerves of a situation scare you from doing something. Meaning, like, I honestly, doing that first fashion shoot, I was low-key terrified. I was like, number one, how do you guide models to give them exactly what you need from them? Because that's a whole nother thing, being comfortable enough to say, here, can you give me more of this? Because obviously not a model. So how do you really give them good guidance during that? The printing thing, even just talking to the printer, I was like, he was throwing some really intricate information my way. And I was like, okay, there's a lot that I still have to learn. It's okay to not know things, but don't let that stop you from still diving in and learning them, because, and you'll find people are much more willing to help you out than you imagine that they will be. And so that's what I would say. And it's something I'm still telling myself, don't be afraid of new situations and throwing yourself in, even without knowing what you don't know.
Well, I know that, you know, you being the quintessential kind of artist and musician, it would have been great for you to play us out, but I also know that your instrument is not tuned. So
Yes.
I'm a little willing to yield here, except I'm wondering how your voice is.
Okay, hold on. B, you know I'm a background singer. My sister's the lead singer. Next time, you see, here's the deal. I haven't changed my mandolin strings in probably a year, which is a sin in the music world. They sound dead, and if you do one strum on it, it falls out of tune. Next time, I will be more prepared, I promise you. Next time.
Okay, luck favors the prepared. You never know.
Yes,
who's
it does.
attending
It
right
does.
now.
See, I learned something new today. I learned something new today. I was not prepared.
It is so great for you to share this. And I think what's been really kind of valuable and priceless about this conversation is quite often there's this perspective or this kind of impression out there of Leica that doesn't kind of expand to the authority and the permission to experiment with the camera, to get to know the things that you don't know, to have a starting place, right? You know, like you said, you started with the M6 because you wanted that manual hands-on experience and really figuring out the workings of how that camera works. I started with the Q2 because I wanted to start capturing the things that I saw visually in that moment, right? And so each person has a different starting place, and they can have that starting place based on what they want, and then be able to kind
100%.
of choose that camera and kind of equipment. And just like you have, where you have multiple cameras now based on different goals and different ways of seeing things, kind of being able to have that experience. So thank you for joining us here. I am sure it is just one of many conversations that we will have with you. For those who are joining with us here, definitely be sure to take a look in the chat. Follow Neil over on Instagram at Neil Perry. You can also follow the music Neil Perry, you know, at the band Perry. And, you know, thank you so much for being able to kind of have that willingness to kick us off for this year.
Well, Neil, I can't thank you enough for being part of the Leica family. Your support has been tremendous, and we are just so excited to see where your visual journey leads you. I see galleries and books in your future, and I can't wait to see it all come to fruition. And Neil, just one parting word for our audience. If there's one word to encapsulate what photography means to you, what would that word be?
Nostalgia.
I'm gonna leave that with our audience, and thank you all so much for being here. We'll see you next week on Thursday, 4 p.m. with Joseph Michael Lopez, 4 p.m. Eastern, Leica Conversations. We'll see you all then. Thank you, Neil. Thank you, B.
Love you guys.
Bye,
Thank y'all.
everyone.
Appreciate it.
Bye.